If you listened to last week's episode, we were talking about focus and some of the challenges that Jonathan and I have had over the years as entrepreneurs with maybe what we might call neurospicy brains. And so we want to continue this conversation because we talked a lot more last week just about maybe some of the experiences that we've been having. And then this week wanted to bring you a little bit more. If you related to last week's episode, if you didn't hear it, go back and listen. But if you related to last week's episode, we wanted to give you some things that work for us and permission for you to maybe not have to fit in with what some people might call neurotypical. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alicia St. Germain, and I'm here with my co-host, Jonathan Duggar. So today will be a lot of fun, Jonathan, because we talk about our brains. In fact, we realized when we finished last week with the episode on focus that we may have been a little all over the place because there was so much we wanted. Talking about focus. Because there was so much we wanted to share. And if you're new here, we talk about the whole human experience that goes along with building a business and creating wealth. And that it's not just a formula that you follow and the money comes in. It is really an emotional, physical, mental, spiritual experience of living life and creating or working your business. So super excited to have you. And so let's get into today's episode without any delay. First thing I wanted to tell you, Jonathan, is after last week's episode, I felt a little bit bad.
Explain
because that. I was like, ooh, I think I might have come across a little bit harsh on the whole conversation I had about are people using this ADHD or coming out, influencers and marketers coming out as like, I have ADHD as a marketing tactic to relate to people or not, or is it like really a real thing? And you shared a statistic that something like 40% of entrepreneurs tend more towards neurospicy.
Some form of neurodivergence. Neurodifferent.
Versus 10% of like the regular population. So entrepreneurial endeavors naturally attract that type, these different brain types, essentially. So we are going to see more prevalence of it. But also I felt a little bit bad for like questioning someone's intentions.
Yes.
And so I wanted to just say if I was disrespectful or triggering to anybody last week over that comment, it certainly wasn't my intention. It was my own curiosity. It was my own thing, my own skepticism of what I see on the internet and questioning like if this is truly a pure intention or a tactic or strategy. And I think partially because ADHD, specifically ADHD, is very overutilized. And when I mentioned that to you, you said, well, it does have a derogatory nature.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if you could just kind of comment a little bit about that piece, because it's a very uncomfortable place to navigate.
I think this whole conversation is just a reminder for all of us to just be very, very careful with our labeling in general, but in this area with something that has profoundly far-reaching effects in terms of how our brains work, how we solve challenges, how we work in jobs, how we function in school, how we function in relationships. You can name any sort of important interaction. And there's key elements related to how our brains work and how our bodies respond to the way our brains work. So, I think we just need to be careful with labels in general and how we use them and when to use them. And I'm just going to say, myself and a lot of other clinicians try not to even use the terminology of attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder anymore. We feel like it's an outdated term, and we feel like it's an inaccurate term, especially the word deficit. And this applies directly to the subject we're talking about related to focus, because there's this ideology, because of the terminology, that there's something deficient in this person's brain. And we often think of, because you see this really in kids, you see it in adults too, but it's profoundly obvious in kids, where they zone out or space out, that they're actually deficient in their attention, so they're not paying attention. That's absolutely the opposite. They have so much stimulation going through their brain at any given time that they're trying to self-soothe. They're trying to find a way to exist and not implode or explode in some way. Yeah. So it's actually an over attention. It's a lot of stimulation that the brain is trying to figure out how to parse through and figure out how to prioritize. So that's really where some of these techniques and approaches to attention and focus come in, is learning how to parse and how to utilize your own individual, uniquely individual way that your brain works in the most effective and efficient way. So, I like some of these more fun terms just because it leaves it more open. Something's different. Because I think we talked about this in the last episode, left-handed and right-handed. Most of the world's right-handed. Mm-hmm. Some of the world's left-handed. Mm-hmm. Most of the world's neurotypical. Some of the world's neurodifferent. Mm-hmm. So, it's like, I like it that way, because then it makes you curious. You ask questions. It's not a label that says this is what you are and this is how you're supposed to be, or this is what we've got to do about it because it's a problem. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you do things differently. Let's talk about that. Let's see how we can be the most effective, most efficient, most productive that we can be. So,
yeah. And I think a lot of it comes from like the group learning, right? Like wanting everyone to kind of fit into a certain way that works. I think there's people are a lot more open to people learning in different ways, but I think we're just at the very beginning of it. But I think where this translates into entrepreneurship is a lot of us come up with these, I should be able to do what all of these really successful people are doing that they told me they did to be successful, their success habits, stuff like that. Yeah. And then you like try to do them and it like doesn't work.
And like the Bill Gates and the Richard Bransons and the Steve Jobs and, all those people of the world. It's like, holy mackerel.
Even I talk to my clients and they're like, well, that's what it says I should do on a podcast. Yeah. And I can't. I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to fit into the mold, and I'm really frustrated with myself. And I think that's, you and I are both very much advocates for finding what works for you and letting go of whatever shame you have about not doing it like everyone else.
Let go of the judgment. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So one of the things that oftentimes people want, like they talk about making lists, like because I was asking you, I was like, okay, what's something that doesn't work for you? And you're like, making lists. And I do make lists and then I forget to bring my list or I lose my list. Yeah. That happens to me.
And I should say, making lists in a typical way. So your typical bullet point, do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, does not work for me. Lists in my way that I've adapted and that other people have utilized works for me.
Okay, so how do you do it? Like, give me another option.
Okay, so I'm very visual. Mm-hmm. I'm very visual. So when I make my lists, I write down what the thing that I'm supposed to do. I put a time frame on it, like an estimated this should take me about 30 minutes, and I put an endpoint to it. I know I'm done when.
Okay.
And that helps me visualize what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, and sometimes even where I'm going to do it. So you can be as specific, you can add detail to it. You can add, a friend of mine that does this, she has colors. She's very visual, but she also she's an artist. So she has colors, and colors represent a type of task. And so she has different, like 4 or 5 different colors that she uses with her tasks. And she can look at the color and already kind of start feeling what it's going to be like.
Okay.
So I do think lists can be very effective because they help us break down the chaos. Like I was talking about, too much stimulation coming in at once. But again, just like you were saying, we have an idea that there's one way to do a list. Mm-hmm. There's one way to, bullet point 1, bullet point 2, and we put them in priority or put them in, the amount of time they're going to take. We kind of get some sort of order to them. Well, my list for me is simply, I am so strongly object permanence. Do you know that from developmental psych? Out of sight, out of mind, basically.
Yep.
I am so strongly cue oriented that if I don't have a cue to bring me back to a place of focus, then I can be all over the map at any given time. And some days are worse than others. Some days, even cueing, I have to double up on cueing, or some days I have to throw in the towel and say, this is not a focus day. But so my lists are cues. My lists are cues, reminders, points of contact for me to get back to a particular thing. Like I can pick up my list. Actually, my list is on the back of my notes for today's podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So here's an example of my list, something I have on my list. So I'm in the middle of doing my continuing ed stuff. So I say continuing ed, that's my item. Make sure set up on software, do one section in the first 15 minutes of next 3 days, finish all sections by Friday.
Okay.
So my list is a narrative. It's not just a bullet point, because I think in narrative. I'm not a bullet point person. So I've adapted my list for how my brain works, how the voices in my head work. So
I think I've never tried it that way, but I will. But I think that's really helpful because when I see something like a list, the mental energy of figuring out where to start. So you're actually taking the time to figure out, like, this is how I will start, because that is a really hard thing for some people, is like just starting. Once they start, they're good to go, but just starting is really tough.
Yeah,
so I noticed that you have in there, like, where to start. Also, the urgency, right? Because we will always take as much time as we give ourselves. So having, I used to think I need all this time to do something. And what I've realized is I'll still push it till the end. So being like that fast action taker and saying, like, I'm going to do this today. But my question for you is, do things take you longer than you think they will? Because you said I put a time frame.
It depends on the thing, and it depends on the day. Yes, sometimes they do.
Okay.
And having clear points of reference of, like, understanding what the steps to completion are very helpful for me, because then I can much better gauge the time. And it actually helped me as a real estate investor, because I started learning how to break down projects into increments and figure out time frame and money related to those time frames. And so it's kind of all related to how my brain works, where I chunk things. If I can chunk things up, it also helps us stay out of overwhelm. We feel like a task is huge when we can break it down into its steps.
Yeah.
So
I do that a lot with people who when they say they're overwhelmed, I'm like, well, hang on, what is just like the first thing that you have to do?
Yep.
And so we only focus on the first step. And I said, and then we'll figure out what the next step is after that, but just the first step. That is oftentimes very helpful. So that's an interesting way. Look at new ways of making lists that work for you.
And I also just thought of this. I think there are a lot of people that are list averse because they just make them uncomfortable from the rigidity of them. Because a lot of neurospicy brains, they revel in the flexibility and the freedom aspect, but really resist rigidity, resist a specific structure, especially if it's not a structure they created. So I even in my language, because I'm that kind of person, in my language, so I have gym or walk, one-ish. So I gave myself options for something active, and I gave an ish time frame. I know it's going to be around that time. So just doing something that may seem somewhat ridiculous to you avid list makers, but for me, using the language of flexibility in my actual list is hugely helpful. It removes some of the resistance I might have to actually putting a list together.
I keep a running list of things I don't want to forget. So it's not even a list of things to do.
Those are your
It's
cues.
just a list of things so I don't forget, because I also have object permanence. And if it's not in my awareness, it is. For those of you who've listened for a long time, the BMV, right? That's my arch nemesis, is not getting my tags and things renewed on time. And incidentally, I've renewed my, we're getting ready to go camping, and I renewed my tags, and I always put the tags in the glove compartment so that when I go pick up my pop-up camper, I always have it with me because I'm going to have the car that's going to haul it. I don't know what I did. I didn't follow my system, and I can't find them in the frickin' glove compartment. So now I'm going back to the BMV to get a replacement tag because I can't find it. So, story of my life. But I have to do that for gifts. If I pick up a gift for someone and I put it away until, and it's like months in advance, I have to keep a list of like gifts I bought, where I put them, because I don't know.
Yep.
So lists are not to-do lists. Lists are like cues.
Yeah, exactly. So, the overreaching umbrella for all of these things for me personally, and I've worked with a lot of people that this has been super effective too. And you guys can probably guess where I'm going because I talk about this so much. But the idea of mindfulness. Because two of the core concepts of mindfulness, or core practice effects of mindfulness, are targeted awareness. So being aware at any given moment of time of what you're doing, how you're doing it, how it's making you feel, what thoughts are coming up. And it's an instant thing. It becomes, the practice is for it to become unconscious and just be not something you don't have to dwell on. And then right along with that, the awareness is removed from judgment, because we tend to spend a lot of energy and effort and time in judgment. So when we are beating ourselves up because we don't feel like we're being as effective as we could be, or we've had people actually tell us over and over again, well, if you really applied yourself, you could do so much more. So when you get to a place and your practice is not judgment loaded anymore, it's not only hugely freeing and hugely healthy, it releases so much energy that can be applied in different ways that it's hugely freeing. So becoming aware of those places of inattention and how to apply that in helpful ways is huge. And that's what mindfulness is. And becoming adept at the practice of mindfulness, I don't want to say it cures a lot of these things, but it gives you a different perspective and a different way to leverage and apply yourself that you didn't have before. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience, but I have utilized this approach with groups and with individuals over the past 5 years, specifically in hugely helpful ways. I've seen huge positive changes in whole organizations and how they do things.
Tell me more about that, because I am definitely someone who judges myself, or it's just like, I would say I judge myself, but more like sometimes I'm just, I don't even know the word. Maybe you could help me come up with it. But when I do some of these dingy things, it's just like, I can only describe it as like like,
Really? That's my seriously.
You know,
that's
and
my thing.
It does feel like you're failing. It does feel like you're failing. Like, I know at this point, being 45, like I sat on the bed next to my husband last night and I was like, I don't know if I'm losing my mind now that I'm 45. Like, do I have like some kind of dementia setting in, or is this just how is my hormones mixed with, and I've heard women say this before, a lot of undiagnosed women with some kind of neurodifferent brain say that when they hit like perimenopausal, it like gets way worse.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't know if I'm losing my mind.
Well,
so there's like a part of me that I think that's judgment.
Yes. It's also we don't do well in places of confusion. So when we're confused, when our own brain and bodies are confusing us, like I've been having some back issues the past few days and I've been doing everything right and I'm still having them, so it's like I get frustrated, I get angry, so when you're going through biochemical, neurochemical changes and you're already hypersensitive to neurological input, neurological changes, it magnifies all those effects. So this is where, again, mindfulness can become huge, because when you are in a state of in-the-moment awareness and you're able to say, okay, this is how I feel and I don't like it, but you stop there instead of going to, this makes me less, this makes me out of control, I should know better, I have all these skills and resources. It's hugely powerful because you're now in a place of, okay, let me figure this out. You know what? I don't have a moment to take a beat and figure this out. So I'm going to write this down. I call it a thought dump. I'm going to write this down. I'm going to track back to it because it's important. There's no judgment in that.
Yeah.
And that, talk about maximum control. Now you're in a place where, okay, I know something's going on and I don't like it and I'm okay right now, but I have these other things to do. So that's...
I chalked it up to, well, it's 9:50 at night. I'm certainly not going to solve this right now. And
there you go.
Maybe some sleep will help. So I'm going to go to bed.
There you go. But and I can't pretend, even come close to pretending that I have any of this mastered. But what I can say, and I say this somewhat from a place of pride because it has taken a lot of work and I continue to work on it every day, I am much more likely to go to a place of curiosity and, let me think about that some more. Or you know what I need to do a little digging too, is like instead of a WTF, how could you be doing this again? Why are you spiraling now? All this self-deprecating language that used to just form in my head and come out in my behavior because I should know better.
Yeah.
I've done better than this before. You can do better. So-and-so's doing better. All these other things that we do to ourselves that are judgment loaded.
Yeah.
So just the daily practice of mindfulness and learning how to take those points of awareness and leverage them into actual changes and actually developing a system that works for you is hugely powerful, because that's the piece that's left out of a lot of these self-help books and a lot of these skills thing. It's the mindfulness aspect. It's like you need to figure out what works for you, but in order to do that, you've got to figure out how to find the focus on those points in time when things go awry, or those points in time when you do really, really well. And when you can start figuring out whatever those triggers are, those cycles are, the food you eat, all those bits and pieces that are parts of the jigsaw puzzle, it's hugely powerful for invoking effective change.
It's interesting how much, and this is we won't go down this rabbit hole, but I just want to say this one sentence. I have found that what I consume in my body, food-wise, alcohol-wise, sugar-wise, all of that does affect it for sure. So on the topic of multitasking, because we talked about multitasking along with like how mindfulness helps with that. they say we can't multitask in general. I think that's just a in general thing I've heard, is that we actually don't multitask. We just switch very quickly between things.
Right.
And is that different in the neurospicy brains?
So one of the things that we try and make ourselves feel better by using is saying that we're awesome multitaskers. Well, that's usually not true.
Okay.
When you look at how multitasking manifests, because multitasking, when you're jumping from one thing to another and often not completing as effectively as you can that particular task, you're actually using multitasking as a distractor because you're getting bored. Or you're getting resistant because it feels too hard, or it's not fun enough, or, it's not inducing enough dopamine. So we switch to something else. That's where, the person that is folding their laundry while on a call, while making dinner, while doing all these other things, we may call that multitasking, but like you said, often if they're doing it effectively, they're completing a task and switching another task, and they're keeping all those plates spinning at the same time. That's really not multitasking in the definition of the term. So if you ever find yourself not completing tasks and jumping to other things, that's the ineffectiveness of multitasking. I'm using air quotes that we usually talk about. So doing one task at a time, quickly changing to another one, that we can become very adept at. And I do think, again, this isn't a competition, but often a neurospicy brain may actually be able to handle more of those back-to-back-to-back tasks in an effective way if they're done correctly. And if you are, again, aware of yourself and when your energy is getting depleted, when your focus is getting depleted, when you need to take a break, which could definitely go on the list too.
Here's how I find it works effectively for me, because I can get, this is the thing, I can either do nothing and look busy all day, which we talked about this last week, or I can accomplish an incredible amount of things in a day, but it's going to look like chaos in the middle of it. Like if you were to have someone walk in, they'd be like, oh my gosh, what is happening right now? And then by the end of the day, it's whipped up into a package.
Yeah.
But I think how my brain works and why I can do that is because I'm not looking at the task as a whole project. I'm looking at the task as a series of little tiny mini projects. And so I will work on something and complete that mini project. And then I'm okay, well, I don't want to work on that project anymore. So I'm going to go work on this project over here. And I'm looking at, okay, I'm going to take it to this point. And so I tend to finish, but not the whole task until the end.
Yep.
And that's what it looks like when I'm doing it effectively. When I'm not doing it effectively, I'm also using it as...
Wait, where did I leave my phone? Wait, why do I have a red pepper sitting next to my computer keyboard?
100%. 100%.
Why are my keys in the refrigerator again?
That's me. Or that's you, not me. And my husband will find, but my husband's oh yeah, sometimes I find things in really weird places. So there's ways where I do it effectively, and I think there's days when I don't do it as effectively, but the not judging of, yes. I think that's the piece of this is how I do it, and it works to keep me from getting bored doing something.
Yep. So one of the things, though, that is an interesting, that you can turn this kind of thing into an experiment, too, because it is, when you're trying to figure out your most effective approaches to different things that work for you, it takes a while, and they don't always work, and you may have to change them up. But one of the things that I encourage people to try is this one task at a time assignment, where you truly complete a task before moving on to the next one. And that doesn't work for every task, but let's just say folding laundry as your task. So, and I caught myself doing this. So applying mindfulness and a targeted awareness to a task lets you know when you're getting pulled off task. So you start to get bored and you think your brain starts generating things for you to do. Oh my goodness, I'm in the bedroom, so I should go hang that picture right now. I've been wanting to hang that picture for 2 weeks. This would be great for me to do. Oh, I'm going to hang that picture. Oh, I've got to go find the picture hanging stuff first. That takes me to the living room. Oh, I'm in the living room. Look how dusty this place is. You know what? I should dust right now. So that's where it can spiral out of control. So what I encourage people to do is start finding the dopamine in the task completion. So finish the laundry and then congratulate yourself. I finished folding all this laundry and putting it up. Task completed. Woohoo. Next, I thought about the picture hanging. Let's do that next. If it's like, oh, you know what? I should add that to my list for tomorrow because I have these other things. So that's, again, that kind of awareness of being pulled off task and why it's coming up. It's like, oh, I really hate laundry. Those are the kind of things that are good for you to explore later. Those are good things to kind of nail down as your triggers or your distractors or whatever it is, the things that are harder for you to get done, and some of the whys behind it. But staying curious instead of judgmental and beating yourself up about it.
Okay, you have put me up for a challenge. I'm going to try this because you also described me in my everyday life quite well there. So I do, and I start to feel like this itchiness. Even this morning, getting ready, knowing that we were going to record, and I'm curling my hair. As I'm curling my hair, I'm thinking oh, I've got to send that email. Oh, I need to follow up with, and the want, because I didn't have my phone with me, the want was to go downstairs and find my phone to do it. And I was like, no, you can totally stay here and finish this. But I get itchy.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly it.
And part of me gets itchy because I know I'm going to forget. And by the way, I haven't sent those emails because I didn't have my list with me to write it down so that I don't forget it. And so I think for me, from a mindfulness standpoint, is some of the itchiness and the anxiety that I feel around some of these things and not doing them right away is that I will forget.
Yep. I do think that this, I mentioned the thought dump idea. I think that that's hugely important for developing some of these, getting insight and awareness into some of these things, because we waste a lot of energy with that thing we can't remember.
Yeah.
Oh man, I know there was something else. It's driving me crazy.
Yes.
So whether it's on your phone, and there's a lot of good apps and tech out there, and I don't use it as much as I could, but, or the voice tech, I tell Google stuff all the time. Okay, Google has become I just activated my phone, has become my best friend. I tell Google stuff to remember for me all the time. And I can just say it because I almost always have my phone close to me, unfortunately, I guess, in some of these days. Or if you have Alexa in your home, you can use that, or Siri, or whatever you use. Use it as a real assistant. Remember to tell me. Set a timer for me. I use timers all the time now, especially when I'm hyper-focused on something like... Google's talking to me now. Hang on a second.
I don't even think we're going to edit this out because it's so appropriate for this podcast.
But being able just to let go of that and know that I'll track back to it later and it will be remembered. It frees up a lot of energy and cognitive power too.
Yeah. So, and we're coming down to the end of our time here, but I do want to mention, because I loved that Forbes article that you told me about, and really about reframing, because so much of some of the things that the rest of society and schooling and corporate and the things that we sometimes do that don't fit into the box are the things that make us so gifted in entrepreneurial endeavors. So you found this article in Forbes.
Yeah,
what was it called?
It's an article. It's based on a French study from 2016 of entrepreneurs and small business owners, and the link between neurodiversity symptomology and what they called entrepreneurial orientation. and it's called, the article was called "The Power of Neurodivergence."
The power of neurodivergence.
Yeah.
But to summarize it, so inattentiveness is the inattentiveness that we sometimes have leads to or breeds imagination, creativity, and exploration. I love that. Hyperactivity, which I think you have more than me, is really great for multitasking and innovation. And the impulsivity is great for risk taking and like getting into action, like the willingness to take action quickly. And there is something to be said in entrepreneurship around you're going to get farther faster if you are willing to take some risks and that you take action. So I thought that was a really nice way for people who have sometimes looked at these things that they have about themselves that are they've maybe up until now, maybe you thought that they were not helpful. And here, if you look at a little reframe, it really changes how you feel about yourself and or someone else around you, because also you might be listening to this and you might have a partner or somebody in your life who is this. And bless my husband for
I thought about doing a podcast on that for those in our lives that have to put up with us on a day-to-day.
Yeah, everything that is regulating for myself and my two children is dysregulating for my husband. I feel so bad for him. So, anyways, any final thoughts, Jonathan?
Just to keep remembering that we're all different. And difference is good. Difference keeps society balanced, keeps us moving forward. And learn to find gratitude and gratefulness in your differences. Work on your neurodivergency being a superpowers. And work on letting go of judgment about how you're supposed to be. And instead, pay attention to how you are and maybe how you can do better. Or how you can do different, and how
I'm so glad you said that. How you can do better and how you can do different, because I also think there's a place for us to have compassion and empathy for the other people for society and the people in our life. Like we also get to do better to help those around us as well. Like the whole world doesn't mold to us. It's a give and take balance, a give and receive. So I deeply want to also meet the needs of other people around me and not just think that other people have to fit into my world.
Exactly.
So it's both, right?
It is. It's a give and take and a shared collaboration.
Yeah. So with all of that being said, sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.